All right, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be comparing two shoes that I believe are very popular and I would say pretty controversial, both of them. And those are the ASICS Superblast 2s versus the Adidas ADIZERO EVO SLs. Now, I feel like both of these shoes are super hyped up. A lot of people either love them or hate them, so let's get right into the comparison. So, as always, we're going to start off with the outsoles on both of these shoes. On my left, we have the ASICS Superblast 2 outsole, and on my right, we have the ADIZERO EVO SL outsole. And when it comes to traction performance, hands down, the Superblast 2s outsole performed so much better on basically every single condition that I tested my shoes on, which is typically on the road in pretty ideal weather conditions. Now, I do live in Los Angeles, so I do run on the beach sometimes, and sometimes the roads are a little bit sandy or there's a lot of debris on the roads. And I still felt that the Superblast 2s just performed so much better than the ADIZERO EVO SLs. In my opinion, the traction on the EVO SLs is some of the worst traction I've had in a running shoe. It's a little bit interesting because Adidas has put their famous Continental rubber outsole on this shoe, but I do think that it's due to the lack of different textures on the outsole, which is what makes the shoe so slippery. The rubber compound itself is very solid from a durability standpoint on the EVO SL, but when it comes to traction, I just thought it was no bueno. That's just my opinion on the outsole and my experience. Now, the Superblast 2's outsole, I don't want to make it seem like it's the best traction that I've ever experienced in a shoe because there are some problems with this traction pattern. But if you're deciding between these two shoes, the Superblast 2 wins hands down when it comes to traction performance. Now, really quickly touching on durability, I have around similar mileages on each shoe. I honestly forgot the exact mileage I have on each shoe. I believe the Superblast 2s I'm at around 75-ish, and then the Evo SLs I'm around 60 to 70 miles. I'm not exactly sure, so don't quote me on that. But as for durability, both of these shoes are actually holding up very well from the outsole point of view. When I look at the Adidas Adizero Evo SL's outsole with the Continental rubber, even though it is a very thin layer of rubber on the outsole, I feel like it looks brand new. It is, besides it being a little bit dirty, as you can see on the bottom of the shoe, which is to be expected as you run in the shoe, the actual Continental rubber outsole itself looks brand new. It doesn't look like it's really worn down at all. So I do have to give Adidas props and Continental props on the rubber outsole when it comes to durability. If only they could fix that traction issue. Now, talking about the Superblast 2's outsole, I believe this might be like an ASICS hybrid grip rubber, but I'm not exactly sure. I'll put it up on the screen if I do end up figuring it out. But the outsole looks a little bit more traditional. As you can see, the black rubber pods on the outsole, and the durability is holding up very well. I've seen a couple of other reviews talking about, they've put 200 to 300 miles on the Superblast 2 and it's still going strong. For my pair, it's still under 100 miles because I've been testing so many other shoes, but the durability seems to be holding up very well. There is a little bit of wear and tear in the high wear area. So for me, that's like the middle of the forefoot, as well as if there's any heel drag, there's actually none. So most of the etchings on the black rubber pods on the outsole are actually still very intact and look very healthy. I would just say that some of the etchings in the higher wear areas in the forefoot are starting to degrade, which is kind of to be expected as I am a heavier runner and I put 75 miles on the outsole of the Superblast 2. So overall outsole performance, if you're only looking at durability and you run in the best conditions, I still think that you could get away with the ADIZERO EVO SLs. But if you're like a normal runner or you run in all types of different terrain, I would say that the Superblast 2's outsole is just going to fare better for you. I really didn't enjoy feeling like I was going to slip in the Evo SLs. Now, let me know in the comment section down below if you guys have had that issue with the Evo SLs or it's just me. So overall, outsole, I'm going to have to give it to the ASICS Superblast 2 for durability as well as traction performance. Now moving on to the midsoles, which is kind of everyone, or at least my favorite part of running shoes. Starting out with the Superblast 2, we're going to go over like a high level spec list. I'm not going to list out all the numbers, but the Superblast 2 is non-plated and it has a full length, a very high stack height, over 40 millimeters in the heel, of FF Turbo Plus, and I believe it has an 8mm heel to toe drop and over 40 millimeters, like I said, in the heel, dropping to around mid 30s, I think, in the forefoot. And the Evo SLs have a full length Light Strike Pro midsole. I believe it's under 40 millimeters in the heel, dropping to, I think it's like a 6.5mm drop to the forefoot. So it's around low 30s in the forefoot, and it does have a plastic shank in the middle of the foot. It's a midfoot shank, so it's not going to be giving you the properties of a full length plate or a 3/4 plate. I think they just put that for a little bit of maybe stability or some torsional support. Just listing off the specs, you might be wondering, why am I comparing these two? Well, first of all, I actually saw a comment on one of my previous videos requesting this video, so I'm kind of fulfilling that request, as well as I do think that there are some similarities between these two shoes, even though they are at different price points and do have different stack heights. Me being fortunate enough to have both of these shoes and running in both of these shoes, these stack heights, don't let them fool you. I feel like sometimes when I look at the specs of shoes, and I see like the Superblast 2s has, I think it's like 45 millimeters of stack height in the heel. I'm thinking, you know, like, whoa, like once I get these shoes on, like I'm gonna feel like I'm wearing high heels. But when I actually had the shoe or I tried the shoe on, it actually felt like not that high, or it didn't feel like it was absurdly tall, at least the stack height. And the Evo SL's cushion setup, even though it is under 40 millimeters, when I put the shoe on, I feel like both of them have similar cushioned feels. Not to say that, you know, the Superblast 2 isn't a little bit taller, but what I'm saying is when I'm wearing the shoes or actually feeling the shoes on foot, I do feel like they have similar levels of cushioning, which is why I think I would like to compare these two. And I think that as an average consumer as well, if you're not too into the specs, you might be looking at either or of these shoes. So speaking on cushioning, I think that the Superblast 2s, we'll start with that. FF Turbo Plus is very light. It's super, I don't think it's super bouncy, but it's just responsive, if that makes sense. So for me personally, when I run super fast in the Superblast 2, so like I'm going, you know, 5K pace or maybe bordering 10K pace, I do feel like the cushion setup is not super responsive or super bouncy. But I think the sweet spot of this shoe, or the beauty of this shoe, is on those long runs, especially when you're around marathon pace, which for me is around 8:30 to 9 minute, or my goal marathon pace. That's where the shoe feels like the most responsive. It feels the lightest. It feels like it has the most impact protection. So the foam does kind of adapt to based on what type of pace you're throwing at it. As I said, there is no plate in the Superblast 2. And also when I'm running slower paces in the Superblast 2, I just feel like it has a little bit of a rocker, and the FF Turbo Plus really kind of promotes running a little bit faster. So I think that there's a sweet spot in the Superblast 2 personally. I think for me, it's around marathon pace to maybe 1 minute per mile slower than marathon pace. Any slower than that, if you're thinking about the Superblast 2 for recovery runs or for really slow runs or really fast runs, like either extreme, I don't think that this setup is going to be the most comfortable, as it does change based on how fast you run. So I felt like when I was running super slow, it was soft, but I felt like the rocker and just the foam in general just wanted to push me a little bit faster. And when I ran super fast, I felt that the foam was a little bit dead, or it was a little bit more firm, and it just wasn't the most pleasant experience in the Superblast 2. So I would say around marathon pace is when I got the most bounce, as well as I felt the lightweight properties of the midsole, as well as just overall the shoe. Now, when it comes to the ADIDAS EVO SL setup, I do think that this is definitely softer than the Superblast 2 setup. And I think that this shoe shines a little bit more on the faster side for me personally. I do think that this shoe is way too unstable for me to really enjoy long runs in the shoe. And I'll talk about why I feel like it's unstable, because it has a little bit to do with the upper as well. But I think that this shoe does a lot better in faster runs and maybe shorter runs for me personally. Like I said, once I get maybe over 10 kilometers in this shoe, I'm not really enjoying myself. I feel like it's a little bit too wild of a ride. I feel like the cushion is very comfortable and it does absorb some impact, but I also do feel like it's a little bit too unstable for myself to run long distances in, but it does feel a little bit more bouncy at those faster paces than the Superblast 2. So with all that being said, I think it's kind of up to you on what type of ride you prefer. I think that the Superblast 2 does a great job at long runs, and it's a little bit more stable, very lightweight, very cushioned and responsive when, like I said, you're at around marathon pace or a little bit above marathon pace. But any faster than that or shorter than that, I do feel like it's not the most fun setup to run in. Whereas in the ADIDAS EVO SLs, I found myself really enjoying shorter runs, a little bit faster runs, faster, than 10K pace. I felt like that's what brought up the fun in the midsole for me personally. Now, if you want to take these shoes on long runs, I'm not gonna like stop you from taking them on long runs. If it fits your needs perfectly, then by all means, I think that this would be a great shoe. But just for me, it was a little bit too unstable for my foot and my running form, as well as we'll talk about the upper and the fit, which is also why I feel like it's just not supportive enough for me personally. So overall, cushion setup, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I'm not biased against one of these two brands, but I do think that the Superblast 2 wins in the cushioning department for me personally. I'm more of a marathon type of guy. Like I love running a little bit on the longer side, like half marathon or full marathon, and I like training for those types of races. I'm not as big of a fan as running fast and shorter distances because I don't know, I just feel out of breath all the time. So for those reasons, for my personal needs and how I train on a week-to-week basis, especially with me starting to train for the Long Beach Marathon in October, I'm gonna have to give the victory on cushion setup to the ASICS Superblast 2s. Now, like I said, it's all up to your preferences, but the ADIZERO EVO SLs, like I said, are good for faster runs and maybe shorter runs for me personally, so maybe that will be the case for you as well. Now, last but not least, we are going to talk about upper and fit of both of these shoes. Now, I'm going to switch things up and I'm going to start with the ADIDAS ADIZERO EVO SLs. This is for me where the shoe completely fell apart. So to give you guys a little bit of context, I have both of these in a normal size 12. So not a narrow, not a wide, not an extra wide. I have both of these in a normal size 12, which is my true size. I do have a slightly wider than average foot. But all my running shoes are basically size 12 normal. So I got the shoe in a size 12 and I just felt like it fit way too big, especially in the forefoot. And the heel lockdown was just a little bit sketchy for me. It didn't really feel like I was really locked in the shoe. I would say that the midfoot lockdown was probably the best aspect of the upper in my opinion, like especially when I cinched down the laces real tight. I put the runner's loop, I tried to pull out all the tricks, but I just didn't feel like this shoe fit my foot very well, which is a little bit surprising because typically with these faster, quote unquote faster shoes, brands like to make them a little bit more snug and a little bit more narrow so you feel faster. But I was just surprised that even for my wider than average foot, I felt like there was a little bit too much volume in this shoe. And just the heel lockdown, that's probably the most important part of a running shoe for me personally. I never want to feel like my heel or my whole foot is gonna fall out the shoe. Like I don't think it was ever a possibility in the Evo SLs, but I just don't like that feeling where like my heel's moving all over the place. And then I feel like that also kind of like impacts my running form a little bit because my foot's moving around in the shoe and stuff. So I would say from a fit perspective, maybe go down half a size if you're interested in the Evo SLs. I just think for me personally, there's just way too much room. Unfortunately, since I have worn this pair, I don't think I can really exchange them for a size 11 and a half. And also, like, I think it's just always good for me to wear my true size so I can let you guys know how the shoe fits for me. So everything is kind of standardized. But yeah, overall, the fit was just horrendous for me, which made the support horrendous. But the upper itself, like the upper materials and how they kind of made the upper, I am a huge fan of it. It's super minimal, super lightweight. It's like a super lightweight mesh that's kind of like a plasticky feel, not in a bad way, but just like a very thin plasticky mesh. And I feel like this material would do really well over the long periods of time where it'll start to conform to your foot and shape your foot really nicely. I just think that if they executed on the fit a little bit better, these would be phenomenal. And I think that this upper is also very breathable, which I think is a pro. The tongue is also very thin and lightweight. And just like overall, I really like what they were trying to do with the upper, especially with the materials. It just kept it really minimal and light. But yeah, the fit was just horrendous for me. So for me, the support was just a no-go. Now with the ASICS SUPERBLAST 2, you have a little bit more of a traditional setup, or I would say like more traditional slash premium, and for the price point, I would expect that. I think ASICS labels this as a mesh upper, but in my opinion, it feels kind of a little bit knitted, which I personally love. I was a huge fan of like Flyknit from Nike and just like knitted materials in general from every brand. So I was happy to see that they kind of have like a knitted mesh on the SUPERBLAST 2. It's definitely not as breathable as the Evo SLs, but it is super lightweight, and like the fit and support were just way better for me than the Evo SLs. So I mean, not a super hard thing to accomplish, but ASICS did it with this shoe. I wouldn't say that the fit and the support were perfect in the Superblast 2. I did, I think, have some heel slippage on the right shoe, but it definitely wasn't nearly as much as in the Evo SLs. So overall, I would say go true to size in the ASICS Superblast 2s and you should be good to go. I think more of the concern about the Superblast 2s is finding availability and finding your size. I've also heard that they don't make over a size 13 in the shoe, so unfortunately for my big-footed friends, you might have to miss out on the Superblast 2, but hey, you saved 200 bucks. So yeah, so the fit and the support and just the upper materials in general were very, very good on the Superblast 2. I think what really stood out to me on the Superblast 2 was that you get so much cushion or like a high stack height, but it still doesn't feel super bulky or big like some of the other shoes like the Brooks Glycerin Max or like the New Balance More V5. So you kind of get that impact protection, yet the shoe is just absurdly light. Like I remember when I first got these in the mail, I felt like there was nothing in the shoebox. Like it just felt super light, especially for my size 12. And typically weight isn't something I really look into for running shoes, but both of these shoes are absurdly light and I'm really happy with how they kind of came out with that. And yeah, maybe I'm getting used to light shoes, so we'll see about that. So overall, for fit and support, I'm gonna have to give it obviously to the Superblast 2s. For me personally, it just supported my foot way better. My foot wasn't moving around a whole ton. The breathability was a little bit lacking in the Superblast 2, but for me, like breathability is kind of like bottom of the barrel. It's not really a prerequisite for me for running shoes unless it's so bad that I start getting blisters or like my feet get really hot, but the Superblast 2s performed very well. So overall, it was a little bit of a slaughter, but the Superblast 2s for me won. Obviously, these are just my experiences in the shoe. And like I said, I train for half marathons or marathons. So that's how I typically run in shoes. So if you are more of a short distance person or, you know, you like running fast, then maybe the Evo SL is going to work great for you, or maybe it fits your foot a little bit better than it did for mine. Everyone's a little bit different, but this is just my like subjective experiences in both of these shoes. And overall for me, even though it is freaking expensive at price at $200 and it's hard to get because it's always like sold out and stuff, the Superblast 2 definitely beats out the Evo SL for me personally. The Evo SL is priced at $150. I did not like how they did the release, and I think the Boston 13, I think they did some similar release where it was like a lottery to get it at first. Not a big fan. Please, Adidas, change that if you end up watching one of my videos, but I doubt it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching the comparison between the Superblast 2s and the Evo SLs. I hope you found this video helpful, entertaining, a little bit informative. And yeah, let me know in the comment section down below if you are deciding between these two shoes, or maybe you have one or you have both. Curious to get your guys' thoughts, but for me, the Superblast 2 definitely takes the cake in this comparison. So I will catch you guys in the next video.